Hi everybody, welcome to the tutorial for the DIY Easter trio. Right now you will see that I'm getting some tape set up. Your tape is included with your DIY kit. You just kind of make some bubbles like that. We're going to put the little pieces on there. It's just a lot easier to paint if they're held down by some tape. I also use my recycling to do it. It's whatever works best for you. Paper towels, recycling. So we're just going to take the little pieces, get them all on there. And then in your kit, you also have some sponges, makeup sponges. I find these are a lot easier to use for painting. So that way you just get the paint lightly on the sponge, kind of like an ink pad consistency, and just lightly tap it on your piece. You don't want to glob it on because then it kind of oozes everywhere. So it's just a lot of light taps. The paper plate that you have too is you can either pour some paint on there and kind of tap your sponge a little bit to dry it out if you get too much paint, or see how I'm squeezing it on the side. So like I said, it's kind of like what you would have the wetness of like an ink pad on your sponge. So you're gonna have to do several layers, especially with white. Sometimes I do 2, sometimes I do 3, depending on how bright of the white that I want to do. Right now, for some of these pieces, they're actually not going to stay white, but because I want like the yellow or the pink to be really bright, I'm putting down like a primer layer for some of the pieces. Like the 2 little feet that I did first, those are feet for the bunnies. Right now I'm doing the wings for the chick, which are going to be yellow, but I just want them to be a lot brighter. So we're just putting down a little primer layer. And you'll see on the nose that is on the second row on the end, that's actually the nose for the chick. And it has kind of like some stitching. Same with the bunny ears here and the outlines on it that are already in. If you go lightly when you're tapping over it, you won't get paint into those score marks. So I know it's going really fast now, but you get the idea. So I'm doing a second layer for the bunny because the bunny is white. And then I'm doing the chick, that yellow. You will get your paint in little cups. For this video, I didn't have them already out in the cups, so that's why I'm using my bottles. So I'm doing the second layer there of the chick just to get it nice and yellow. You'll see that's why I primed it first, because I wanted that yellow to be really nice and bright. So to change your color, this is easy. Snip it off. Then you get a new sponge. So I decided that I kind of wanted the chick wings and the feet and even the nose to be slightly darker than the body. So you have received a few different yellows and even an orange. And then some Q-tips. Right here I didn't have the Q-tip next to me, so I'm using my sponge to mix. But the little cotton swabs that I include in your kit, those are mainly for either scooping the paint out of the tubs onto the paper plate, and also then later for mixing. That's the purpose of the cotton swabs. It's actually a lot easier to use the cotton swabs than it is the sponge to scoop stuff out. Using the sponge is a bit messy, as you can see. So that mixing it with that yellow with that kind of mustard was a little dark, so for me, so I'm doing another bit, just a little dab of orange to kind of just change the color of that yellow just slightly, so that the wings and the feet and the beak stand out a little bit against the body. Doesn't have to be an exact science. You know, with Bob Ross always says there's happy little accidents, and that's really how I paint sometimes too. I don't pretend to be Bob Ross, but you know, it's your project. You need to do what you want, but these are just some ideas for ways to make things pop a little bit. So again, I'm going very lightly over the top, not pressing down too hard because I don't want the paint to glob too much. So I'm actually just kind of doing a little bit of a mixture of the two. But you can see on the paint, on the plate right there, it's just a subtle difference. It's not a huge difference in yellow. So same thing with that fake stitching that's around the nose. You just want to go really light, and even the lines on the wings, you just want to go really light over that so that the paint doesn't get stuck into the channels. And if it does, then just take like a toothpick, or I use like some sharp tweezers sometimes to just give it a little scrape out and you can get the paint right out. So if you just saw that I cut off kind of a thicker chunk of that sponge, it's because instead of using the flat side, the fat side of the sponge, I'm actually going to use the tip. So that's a lot smaller of a sponge. And you have brushes included in your kit too. If you prefer to paint with brushes, you know, then more power to you. I just find that it's easier to do a lot lighter layers so that way it doesn't glob over the side if I use sponges. I think it gets more of an even coating. You don't get the brush marks. You get more of a smoother paint if you use a sponge. But if that is not your preference, then by all means, there's 2 different sizes of brushes included in your kit. So the pink right there, I'm doing the nose, and now I'm doing the feet. The tail, I'm going to leave white, and you'll see later how I kind of highlight the tail a little bit, and that goes on the back of the bunny. So we're just going to paint real fast because you guys get the picture. And then same thing, I'm doing light coats. I know it's a little hard to see around my hand, but I'm just keeping inside of that stitching, the fake stitching, that's faux stitching that is on the bunny ears, leaving a white border. And if you use the flat edge of that sponge, you can just follow along and it creates a real nice line. See, I'm kind of doing it right there. I'm just following along the stitching with the flat edge of that sponge. And it's really easy then just to stay in the lines if you just keep using that flat edge of that sponge along the lines. Okay, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So we're just going to fill in both ears of the bunny with this pink also. We're going to add some highlights in a little bit. So I'm going to do 2 coats of the pink. It's a little hard to see in this picture, but you definitely do need 2 coats. So we'll finish up the other bunny ear. So while this, I basically paint in batches. So now those pink pieces are dry while I was painting the bunny ears. This acrylic paint dries really quickly. So by the time you get done with one, you can go switch over back to the second. So now I'm doing the second coat on the bunny ears. So now I'm taking that mixture of yellow. I'm just going to go along using the flat edge of the sponge to follow that score line along the chick's head. And I'm just painting the top feathers a different color also, just so they can kind of stand out a little bit against the body. And also, I don't do it in this video, but paint the back side of those feathers because they will show up when you glue it to the chunky piece. The feathers will not be glued to the chunky piece, so they will be exposed from the back. So now I'm doing the carrot. Kind of the same thing, going light with the primer. Sometimes I do get in those little tiny score lines. Like I said, I just use something sharp to kind of pick the paint out if I get in there. But the stitching, it's score marks, or it's actually engraved, but it's supposed to look like like stitching like it was fabric. So you want to try and keep the paint out of those. So you're going to use the lighter green. You're going to get two different shades of like orange and green. Use the lighter one for the base because later you're going to see we're going to do some highlighting. So here I've mixed a little bit. I've taken the orange and the yellow and even a little bit of that mustard, and I've made it a little bit darker even than what I did for the nose or in the chick feet and arms. So it's just a little bit darker. So I'm taking that fine brush and I'm dragging it through the paint. It actually helps if you get your brush wet, so it thins that paint out just a little bit and it makes it a lot looser. I'm just doing little swooshes. It's a little hard to see. I'll show you a close-up in a little bit, but I'm just doing light swooshes around the top of those feet, kind of like arches. Does not have to be perfect. It's whatever works for you. And we're just kind of doing little arches to highlight the toes of those feet. So yeah, just get your brush wet and then drag it through the color, and I'm just kind of twirling it as I drag it through to get it all around the brush, and just little swoops up and over. I always say things are perfectly imperfect. And I think that actually makes it look nicer when it's perfectly imperfect, because it really makes it look like it's handmade and not just some cookie cutter piece that anybody popped out. So there you can kind of see the 3 toes of each of the feet. And then I'm doing the dark color on the bottom part of like what the wings would be. So that if you hold the wings up to the chick, you'll see what's the top and what's the bottom. So I'm putting the dark color on the bottom of the wings. I'm right-handed, so I was just it's just easier for me to do my swoops a certain direction. And you can, that's the nice thing about having it on a piece of paper like this, or paper towel, or even your recycle. Just twirl stuff around to the angle that it fits best for your hand. So that's the nice thing. You just can twirl things around. So now this nose, full disclosure, right here, I actually have the nose upside down. So where I'm putting the color on the dark part of the nose, or the bottom of the nose, that actually should be the top. So you'll see at the end that it's upside down. So when you do yours, have the flat part be facing as the bottom, and put the dark color along the bottom, just kind of like a little swoop, maybe across the bottom and just lightly around the corner. It's like a little swoosh. So apparently I didn't have the nose upside down now that I see the outline of this little chick, but you'll see in the final picture I did have another one that was upside down. So that's what I'm talking about. But just make sure the flat part of his nose is facing up and the rounded part is the down part. So right now I'm taking that same dark color and I'm just doing it on the bottom part of those feathers. Just a little swooshes. When I first learned about this painting style, using just the shades that are slightly darker than the base color, the person who told it to me, they're like, this is actually what like Disney does when they highlight their it's like the highlights and the lowlights for their animation. So you'll see a lot of just a shade slightly darker than what the base is. So you don't want a really sharp, contrasty color. It's just subtle, very subtle. In a little bit, we're going to do some light. And I'm going to show you in a little bit a close-up once I get the rest of it painted. You'll see how it's just very subtle. When you're mixing your two paints together, you just want it, well, you can see they're on the plate. See, it's just a very light contrast. Enough that when you see it all together, you're like, that looks cool, but it's not really harsh. See, it's just very subtle. So I've got the darker pink here, same thing. Just lightly drag it through, get your brush wet, lightly drag it through. I'm just running it along the bottom, just like some swooshes. You don't want it to be a perfect outline. You're not outlining it. You're just doing like light strokes. You want it to be kind of random. Like I said, perfectly imperfect. So we're not doing a perfect outline along the edge of the piece. Just very freestyle. That's what I like about doing these highlights, because my hand is not steady enough to do really fine detail. So to have just this kind of casual swooshing along the pieces, that's really what works best for me. And I don't believe I show it here, but I take that same pink and I do just some swooshes around the cotton tail just to give it some little swirls. So now for the ears, we're just going to take that same darker pink and we're just going to add a little bit. This isn't going to be swooshing. This is actually going to be a little bit of shading. So I'm just dragging the color up the side, but see, I'm kind of brushing it thicker in the corner of the ear. I'm kind of fanning it out a little in the lower corners. So drag it thin up the side, but then kind of in the down section, the down corners. When the pink is done, it's almost kind of form a U inside the ear. So it's going to be thicker in the corners and thinner along the bottom and thinner along the sides. But I'm not taking that dark pink all the way up. I'm taking it like about halfway up the ear. So I'm not dragging it through water right now, but I have found since I've filmed this, it's much easier to have your brush be a little bit wet because it does make the paint spread a lot easier. So it's just thinly up the sides and just kind of filling those corners in. Just a little bit of a U shape. Like I said, we're not taking it all the way up because when we switch to white, we're going to put some white swooshes up on the top. So I'm just taking it a little bit further up. Just however far up you feel like it needs to go. So I didn't want it to feel like the pink just ended. I wanted it to feel like it kind of faded away. So we've got the dark orange. I'm running it along the bottom, but then I'm also kind of dragging it up into like a little bit of those lines, just kind of forming like little U's to really highlight the, like what a natural curve of that carrot would be. And just a slight little bit on the top too. So with this green, same thing. I'm not outlining the entire leaf. I'm just doing a little bit along the bottom and a little bit along up the side, because we're going to put white on the top part in a little bit. So here's the white. I'm just doing swooshes along the top. I'm not even going all the way across. I'm just doing little swoops. And I'm sorry this is a little fast, but it's the same exact thing. So just little swooshes along the top, very casual. So now you get a very big pot of glue. It's Gorilla Wood glue. And I'm showing you the back because I opted to paint the back too of the chunky parts the same color as the front, just so it makes it look like one big piece. All of your chunky parts are going to come white, so it's up to you if you want to paint the back. See how the feathers show? That's why I was saying paint the back of the feathers, so that way it's not just wood. So if you decide to leave it white, it will look totally fine, because these are shelf sitters. They're supposed to be tucked on your shelf, and people don't really, if it's on a shelf, your visitors don't normally see the backside anyway. I just opted to paint the entire thing because that was just me. So it's completely up to you. So see how it's just kind of swooped. The low lights are just kind of acting like a curve to highlight that carrot. And then you want the white, very casual. So you don't have to seal your projects. I did not include sealer because that's expensive, but I use Rust-Oleum matte clear. You can see the matte even leaves just a slight sheen. It's not like glossy, but just a finished look. I just get that at either, Home Depot, Lowe's. I even get it at my local Kroger, which in my area is called Fred Meyer. Or you can get Mod Podge and just seal it with Mod Podge. Use a brush or a sponge. I got that little bottle of Mod Podge at the dollar store, and I've had that bottle for a very long time. So a little bit goes a long way. I seal my stuff because I go to a lot of markets. I'm showing you right here the eyes. Just take your fine tip brush, do the base in white. Once that dries, then do the little bit of black just halfway up, just to put the eyes in. Obviously on the bunny you don't have to do a base of white because it was already white. So anyway, I seal my projects because at my markets things get messed, dinged up a lot, and just with transport. So everything I sell, I seal, but acrylic paint is actually fairly durable, so it's up to you if you want to seal it or not. So in this picture here, the fronts have already been glued on to the base, but you just take the sponge and your Gorilla Wood glue, and basically you're putting it on kind of like butter. You don't want it really super globby because it's going to ooze all over the place, and Gorilla Wood glue is actually very strong once it's dried. You'll see here, it's like I'm just buttering toast. You just want it to be tacky, just a little smear. That way it's not oozing out all over the place. Same thing, if you've got paint all over your sponges, just snip off the paint part and you've got a fresh sponge under it for your glue. So for the feet, just kind of line them up. You'll see where they meet. It kind of lines up directly underneath the little nose. They're going to hang over just slightly. And the wood glue, it takes about 15 minutes for it to like truly really set. So you can kind of play with it a little bit. If any starts to ooze out the side, I just take a baby wipe and just kind of lightly wipe the glue up, because it does not dry clear. It will dry kind of yellow. So you do want, if you've got glue all over something, you do want it to be cleaned up a little bit. So this is the one I was talking about. I must have had two different noses. When I painted the highlights and lowlights on that one, I did it upside down. So I've got the dark part along the top and the white part along the bottom of the nose, but hey, it looks okay. See, just a little bit of glue, just a little bit of butter, like exactly like butter. Butter on toast. And when you do put the feet on your little chick and your little bunny, make sure they're flush with the bottom, because these are going to be standing once they're all dry. They're standers, so you want to make sure that the bottom is flat. What I do is I actually kind of stand them up a little bit and make sure that that they kind of level themselves out while the glue is still slightly wet. Same with the tail, because you don't want that tail hanging down past the bottom of that chunky part, because otherwise it's just going to make it tippy. See, that's what I was doing right there. I was leveling it out to make sure it wasn't overhanging. And there they are, your little trio for Easter. Thank you.